those on the line, hopefully can get this let's do the chat. Want to welcome you to primarily an online audience today, including my class. We're going to launch of our lecture series for building simulation, and starting off with Lindsay. For those online that aren't aware of the lab, we're a small group as part of the art and architecture faculty and research scientists, and our purpose is to be an educational outreach, right? That we want to kind of raise the bar when it comes to high performance energy efficient design. So we've got resources available to anybody in Idaho Power Service territory. We've got our energy resource library where you can check out books as well as tools to kind of investigate how well your building is performing. And then with our technical design assistance program, this is changing this year, so our amounts are increased. So if you're watching online and you've got a question of a particular technology or material that you're interested in using, and a new like software daylighting analysis that you want to try out, but don't necessarily have the internal resources, that's where our lab can come in and help do some investigative work, do some kind of digital twin building and things like that. So up to $3,000 worth of our time is completely free. Idaho Power covers that. If it's between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of our time, beyond that kind of initial phone call, we'll have to draw up a scope of work. Andy and Cherie here, and make sure that they approve it, that it's geared towards commercial energy efficiency. And if so, then we can move forward and again, up to $5,000 worth of our time. If beyond $5,000 worth of our time, then there's a cost share, but Idaho Power will pay 75% of that. Then we've got Idaho Power's commercial and industrial energy program. Shri, I don't know if you want to mention later on this, our program rolling out this year.
Just call Ann Hurai if you have more questions, and we can do a virtual presentation and more in depth, or come to your office.
And then in terms of upcoming events, we've got another BSUG coming up May 13th, so about a month from today. We'll have Eric Ringgold present on Comstock. And I also want to mention, well, AIA is having their every 2 years Build a Better Idaho Week coming up next week. So check out that. There's some sessions available there. And then we've got the Energy Efficiency Exchange Conference that NIA is putting on. And got a few sessions that I'm shamelessly self-promoting. One is a tour of the lab on Monday, May 4th. There's also some other really cool tours that for those that are already familiar with IDL might want to go on those instead, like geothermal. Too. But on Tuesday, we've got a panel talking about collaboration on some of the programs that we just mentioned. And then the one that I'm particularly excited about is talking about school energy efficiency and opportunities and barriers in that space. So registration is open now. It's coming up soon in 2 weeks, Monday. So if you're interested in energy efficiency and want to network, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Lindsay Watkins, Senior Associate of Decarbonization and Technical Development. Did I get that about right? Yeah. All right. For the U.S. Green Building Council, Lindsay is a local rock star, co-founder of the Climate Club, for those that are interested in that. We've got more than monthly meetings going on. You've got the industry, what was the group?
Climate Industry Night next Wednesday.
And the website for Climate Club, is that?
It's just Climate Club Boise.
Climate Club Boise, okay.
Yeah.
You're also part of the ACE mentorship program, which you helped start. And you said you've got a meeting coming up this afternoon, right? So for those online, and even Tim, if you're not involved in that, it's a really cool program to get high school students interested in the architecture, construction, engineering industry. So, and also Lindsay was named to one of Idaho's 50 Women of the Year this last year, Idaho Business Review. And I'm proud to say that she, so thanks for being with awesome Boisean and sharing your expertise with all of us. And so today, we're going to cover LEED version 5. And my class, we've been talking a little bit about certification programs, and we're starting to delve into energy modeling now and looking at energy efficiency. So I'll let you go ahead and take it away, Lindsay, and talk about how LEED version 5 kind of overlaps with energy efficiency.
Thanks, Damon.
Hey.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can't see everybody online, so you will probably not be able to get my attention if you have a question, but I think Damon will maybe be monitoring those. But thanks, Damon, for the great introduction. Super excited to be back at the lab. I was here, gosh, I guess maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so it's just, yeah, joy to be back and talking about energy efficiency in LEED v5. So, like Damon said, I'm a Senior Associate of Decarbonization at USGBC. My title is a bit confusing. You might think that I specialize in energy efficiency, but I'm actually a materials and resources staff member. So I'm more focused on the embodied carbon reuse side of things. But of course, working on the LEED technical development process, I dip my toes into all of it. That being said, if you have very specific questions, I'm looking at Tim about the energy efficiency credits, energy and atmosphere credits, let me know if I can't answer them, and I'm happy to bring them back to other staff that are very knowledgeable. So today I'm going to walk through the LEED v5 process, go through kind of an overview of what has changed, the updates, as well as the process for that, and then I'll kind of get into, if I were to cover every credit category in depth, we would be here for weeks. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory of change that our team takes for materials and resources, just so you understand the thought process behind it. But then I'm going to pivot to what we're all excited to talk about, which is the energy and atmosphere update. And then I'm going to touch on some platinum requirements and the project priority library. I will say there are some really exciting kind of uplifts in the platinum requirements, because we really understand we need to keep moving the bar over time. So I think everyone here is probably familiar with USGBC, but really it was the group that kind of built a framework for green building, built a checklist and this understanding of where do I even start with green building. So by categorizing out different topic areas, ranging from indoor environmental quality, materials and resources, all the credit categories, to really understanding how we can implement those different opportunities. Okay, so last April, so a year ago, which is amazing, I didn't even realize that until right now, we launched LEED version 5 after a very long development process, which is really exciting. LEED had not been updated for over 12 years. So it was a really big jump, a lot of changes to be made. We have some new working groups, a shift in our technical advisory groups for each credit category. So it's very exciting that LEED v5 came out. And we've had actually an amazing market response, really globally. And we've been working actively to try and touch on those global markets. All this slide to say there's lots of LEED projects. I'm not going to read out all of these metrics to you all, but there are a ton of people getting certified to be, you know, LEED AP, LEED Grade Associates, and we have tons of projects all over the world. So I want to share, I promise we'll get into the nitty gritty here in a little bit, but I really want to share the LEED development process because I didn't actually know how it worked until I was at USGBC being a part of it. So for each credit category, so let's take mine, for example, materials and resources. We have a couple of staff members, but then we also have these amazing technical advisory groups. So all the people that want to be involved in developing LEED, that are experts in their field, whether it's on circularity and reuse, whether that's on low emitting materials like toxicology of materials, things like that. We have a big group of people who we bring credit language to them, talk about their projects, really understand like what is market leadership and how do we form the behavior change we want using LEED as a mechanism. And so these are practitioners, these are people that are at firms, you know, all over globally. Actually, we have global members of the tag as well. So we have those groups, and then when we kind of push things forward, it goes to a consensus committee and then to a LEED steering committee, which are also those are also practitioners, people that do this work every day that are really the leaders in their firm. And so it's very consensus based. It goes through a lot of people. It's not just our staff kind of writing it and sending it out into the world. And then the last thing I want to highlight is we have a resilience and equity working group. Those are two different working groups, and those are new for LEED v5 and have really pushed through all of the credit categories to say, you know, what does equity look like in materials? What does resilience look like in energy? And really building that across the whole rating system. It's a third thread that will all way through. Okay, I'm not going to read all these things. There's tons of stuff, but one thing I want to highlight is that we're going to be, like, rating system development takes a long time. It takes, I mean, you might see snapshots on here, but the process and the governance that it goes through a lot of people. And then one thing that comes with that is we want the industry to keep moving forward, and so we will have like reasonable sunset dates for V4 and V4.1 so that even though people might be scared of energy efficiency requirements or required embodied carbon analysis, it's time in the industry. So it's time to step up our game, and so we will keep moving forward on those things. So if you need more details, you can scan that QR code, but before in 4.1, the registration closes at the end of June. And so, and then there's a 6-year process so you have 6 years to finalize the project and submit. The reason why this is, like I just said, we want to keep projects moving forward, and they've been around for a long time. Like 12 years is a while to be working on one thing. So we're keeping those things moving along. And then along with that, we will have new LEED Green Associate and LEED AP exams. So students, if you are really pushing to get those done and you want to take it under V4, I would rush. And actually the 26th for LEED Green Associate is your last day. So that's about a week away, maybe 10 days. But June 28th is the last day for V4. So I just want to highlight that, especially for students in the room. And I would recommend if you're a student that you take it because it's very inexpensive when you're a student to have that credential. Okay, so let's get into the actual meat of the presentation. Kind of 3 different rating systems under LEED. We have B, D, and C, which is most typical. We have I, D, and C, and then O and M, which is also, there's some really exciting platinum requirements and some changes happening for O and M that we'll highlight in a little bit. But overall, V5, there's a very big focus on carbon literacy, of really understanding where we can find information, how we can start to draw down embodied and operational carbon in tandem. And those platinum requirements really kind of enforce that, which I have a slide on those later. Another piece is this emphasis on using data for data-driven design. We're gathering the analysis and then we're making choices based off of it. So there's a big kind of shift to just gathering data, maybe understanding our moves that we might do or the low-hanging fruit to actually using data to implement decisions. And then we're shifting to this 5-year development cycle. We recognize that 12 years was way too long for an update. And so that 5-year cycle kind of ensures that LEED is responding to the industry, it has strong market uptake, and then we're actually enacting behavior change that shifts with the market. And then I have some fun project priority credits to talk about at the end, but there's more space in LEED v5 for teams to go for those project priority credits. Okay, so in response to the 5-year timeline, 2025, last April, was when LEED v5 was launched. LEED v6 will be in 2030 and on and on and on. So no more questions about when that will come out. It'd be just happening on the timing. Okay, I know there's a ton of information, but probably most people are familiar with the LEED scorecards. So these are all of our credit categories. And again, I can share links to this in an email or something, so we have these online. But really about this organizational strategy for how to approach a project and hit kind of all facets of sustainability in some capacity. So some new things that we'll talk about. We have some good ones in the IP credit category there on top, but just want to give a snapshot. Okay, so super exciting. We have 3 new requirements, prerequisites for LEED version 5. And so there's a human impact assessment, which is really understanding our workforce, our supply chain, and our projects, and really starting to do the things that, and for the architects in the room, that you learn to do in school that maybe don't happen as often in practice. This human impact assessment is really ensuring that your due diligence is done of how to understand those community and kind of people pieces to design to your project. Then we have the climate resilience assessment. So understanding what the climate risks are in your area from a regional standpoint, and additionally reduce the vulnerabilities of a project. So we want to make sure our projects are sustainable in the long term, that they're safe for our occupants and the surrounding community. And I will note there are calculators that USGBC has published on the website for all of these. And so again, happy to share links to that there in the credit library online, where you can find all of this information if you just go to the credit itself and then click on resources. The calculators are nested there. And so really moving forward this kind of investigation, understanding, and genuine implementation on our site. But I know you all are going to be so excited about the carbon assessment. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more, but this is really exciting for us. One more prerequisite I'm excited about that I'll touch on later is for the materials and resources credit category, it is required to quantify and assess your embodied carbon of your project. What this looks like is a bill of materials where you have associated GWP impacts and quantities, which is like, I go wild. I love this credit. It was so exciting that we got this passed because there's a lot of resistance in the market since embodied carbon is so new. But we really, we need to start decarbonizing our supply chains the same way we're decarbonizing our operational for our buildings. So it's super exciting to see this. Okay, so a little bit more about those working groups. So you'll notice that these 2 working groups that came out in addition to our tags with LEED v5 are aligned with that human impact assessment for the equity working group and the climate resilience assessment for the resilience working group. So the tags, our technical advisory groups for each credit category are those experts, and we're analyzing and creating resources. the working groups function in the same way, except they are solely focused on, creating these resources that'll move us forward with these prereqs, but also again, pulling that thread all the way through the credit. So we often consult them on materials and resources, things like social equity and the supply chain for materials, things like that. Okay, so for LEED V5, you can imagine, you've seen that scorecard. There are a ton of different pieces of the puzzle, many credit categories. I think we all had to take a step back and say, what are the driving forces that we're trying to change? And so those organizational kind of strategies are ecological conservation and restoration, quality of life, and decarbonization. And so these are the threads that kind of pull all the way through the rating system, but also serve as maybe when you're talking to a client, you can suss out whether one of these things makes more sense to them or they want to invest more in a project. So you can start to use them as this kind of goal setting exercise. And we've even organized scorecards so that these can be kind of recognized. So say you wanted to present to a client and they're like, what LEED points should I go for? Where should we put our money? You can say, what means the most to you for your project? And you can start to select things based off of those things. In a perfect world, we'd be doing all of these, right? We'd have all of them nailed. But I think it's actually really instructive. And my favorite thing is when I start to see credits showing up in multiple ones, because then you can be like, bam, that one gets all three, let's do it. So I love that we've done this. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick pause for any questions before I start diving into those. Yeah, Dylan.
Mentioned that data or collecting data for impact reporting is a new focus. Is there any requirements or credits someone can get for having building automation system or requirements for having building systems record or host that data?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think there's definitely some facets of that in energy and atmosphere, but I think there's not like a specific credit that is like, this one is dedicated to building on an automation system. It's like nested into those other credits. Yeah, and I'm happy to kind of dive into a couple of credits and like send you some links later. Anybody else? Okay, cool. I'll keep moving.
Sorry,
okay.
before I raised my little virtual hand, wouldn't that fall under the commissioning for the previous comment? Building commissioning?
It could, but I think, yeah, I would have to look back at the credits and see where it's slotted. I think the commissioning piece is more upfront than it would be like the continuous operation of the building. But I'm happy to follow up on that. Thanks, Edmund. Okay. So diving into those impact areas, so decarbonization. This is in my title somehow, amazingly. But really thinking about drawing down carbon, not just operational, which we primarily focus on, but embodied carbon and also transit related carbon. And so I think decarbonization there's so many facets to it, but I think it's kind of best described as a balance of analysis, planning, and action, right? You have to intake the data and understand it. You have to set a plan to follow, and then actually implementing those steps is really your best strategy for actually getting decarbonization done. So how this shows up, for hitting all of those things, for decarbonization strategies within operational, it looks like energy efficiency, electrification, reducing those peak loads, refrigerants, which I know Tim always gets really excited about. For embodied carbon, we see it show up in structure and enclosure, and for materials and products from manufacturers specifically. And again, really a heavy hitter on decarbonizing our supply chains and our production of products. But then also how it shows up in transportation, I think is really interesting. really thinking about density, transit-oriented development, really compact and connected. And so all those pieces kind of coming together build on that decarbonization specific scorecard of, let's draw down all of our major sources of carbon. And here's some of those credits that fall in, right? So we start to see the carbon assessment, which I'll touch on further, but also this EA prerequisite. You know how I talked about kind of planning and analyzing? That prerequisite is going to hit a lot of that decarbonization plan and doing carbon projection to really understand how we can kind of get the most bang for our buck out of our decarbonization efforts. And then, of course, there's a ton of EA credits, but interestingly enough, we start to see decarbonization showing up in many of the embodied carbon credits as well. Okay, and then ecological conservation and restoration, I think we can agree this is kind of all tied with how we use our resources, but also we want to have a low impact on our environment. And I think drawing down those sources of carbon, we have more space to use our resources more effectively. And so it's really exciting that this has kind of built itself into the rating system. We start to see this show up in our sustainable sites, location and transportation, thinking about green space, brown sites, things like that. So there's a lot of different pieces that come in with this. And then quality of life. That equity working group that I was talking about has done so much in our credit to really ensure, bring us back to why we build buildings, right? Where people, it's kind of hot in here right now, right? We're all a little warm. Probably were too heavy of boots to be presenting inside today. But thinking about all of these pieces of, how do we bring in indoor environmental quality, which, Damon is our local expert in, and thinking about connecting people to these buildings in the outdoors, as well as the impact on communities looking outside. Okay. So just kind of coming back to a couple highlights, what I just talked about, providing a design framework, right? Super important to kind of set ourselves up. And this is going to happen for all the students in the room early in design. As soon as you can sit down with your project team, with your contractors, with your consultants and say, hey, these are our goals for the project. Maybe it's not even about LEED at that point, right? But you say, here's our goals. Here's our approach to embodied carbon. Here's where we want our energy bills to come in at. Once you set those goals, you're able to really start moving on them and make those data-driven choices. And then again, highlighting those prerequisites that I'm really. Okay, so I want to touch on briefly. I'm mostly going to focus on B and C here because it has the highest kind of implementation in our region. But operations and maintenance, we have some really exciting platinum requirements coming out. But this, again, it's coming back to this roadmap of how we implement sustainability, not only, but decarbonization efforts specifically. I think existing building stock is such an underrated resource, not only for buildings as material banks, but the opportunity to just keep improving our buildings, whether that's an upgrade in HVAC or, insulating our buildings extra later in life, and just doing the repairs that they need. I think keeping existing building stock is really one of our most sustainable strategies we can implement. So a couple updates with that is, of course, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but also prepping buildings for resilience, right? So like buildings that are already existing, maybe they weren't built for the heat that we're about to experience this summer or crazy rain conditions or things that we're starting to experience with climate change in the valley. So taking a snapshot of those existing buildings, understanding what we can do to improve their operations over time to keep them in our existing building stock. Okay, another quick pause for any questions. I know I'm throwing a ton of info at you. So this is just a little snapshot of the top maybe third of the Excel calculator. And again, happy to share this resource if others are interested. David mentioned the ACE mentorship program. With those high school students, we actually did LEED scorecards for LEED V5 and taught the students. They were very excited about material reuse. They were very excited about enhanced refrigerant management, which was unexpected. So even, I mean, even as a student, or whether you're trying to set goals on a project, and it may or may not be a LEED project, this is like a pretty amazing tool to just kind of help you organize your thoughts and say, hey, how can we do enhanced resilient site design? And then go to the credit library, check it out, and maybe you get some ideas for your project. So I think it's actually a really instructive tool, whether it's a LEED project or not. Okay, and so I've been talking about a lot about MR, I've been talking a lot about EA, but I wanted to give a full snapshot of all of the credit categories and those prerequisites, those assessments I was talking about fall under the integrated process planning and assessments category. With that, I'm going to talk about the carbon assessment because I think it's super exciting. Okay, so within the EA credit category, we have the prerequisite for operational carbon projection in the decarbonization plan. We also have the refrigerant GWP prerequisite, and then the upfront GWP emissions structure, enclosure, and hardscape for MR. And so that's what I was talking about earlier. This is all going to feed into a calculator, which I'll show a picture in a second of like the outputs of that. But it's going to jam all that information together to understand, I believe it's a 50-year carbon assessment. So not only does this help project teams and people certifying LEED projects to pull the information together to say, oh my gosh, it's not just about low embodied carbon materials, or it's not just about increasing the energy efficiency of my HVAC systems, or dealing with my refrigerants, or talking about the grid and cleaning it up. It's about all of it, right? So it starts to weave together these impacts and kind of teach project teams how all the energies can start to slot together. So it's really exciting. I should have gone that slide to just summarize that. I wouldn't have had to say anything. But ultimately, I know when we hear the phrase Excel spreadsheet, like our first thought is like, oh, super sexy, really good stuff. But it actually is a great visualization tool. So it spits out these great charts to where you can start understanding all the emissions together and kind of where your opportunities are, both all together on a square foot basis, and then breaking it, it's a 25-year, I'm sorry, not a 50-year, and breaks it out into where those heavy hitters are. So you can say, oh man, the embodied carbon emissions for this project are 26%, like we haven't done anything for the materials and resources category. But since it's a prerequisite, you have some time to start looking at those decisions in greater depth. So we are super excited to see not only the integration of different categories, but to have some really good inputs for project teams to start saying, okay, we have some visuals to give our client. We have some decision-making tools to start using this data as we make decisions for what credits we're going to pursue. Okay, so just wanted to reiterate that in addition to that carbon assessment, it's really this Venn diagram of decarbonization being addressed through the carbon impact assessment, which we just talked about, quality of life being addressed through the human impact assessment, and then that ecological restoration piece being addressed through climate resilience. So we're really hitting that whole piece. Going back to the impact here, it's really big on it. Okay, so I know often it doesn't get talked about kind of the theory of change behind each credit category. And I know we're here to talk about energy efficiency, but I'm a materials girl, so I gotta touch on it. I talked about decarbonizing the supply chain. And we also saw from the carbon assessment that embodied carbon is a huge piece of the puzzle. So within the materials and resources credit category, we really wanted to push for low embodied carbon materials, healthy materials, and then these concepts of circular economy. I'm not going to read all the ones on the side of the screen because I'll give one example and then I'll kind of move on. So does somebody want to tell me their favorite materials strategy on a project to reduce their embodied carbon? Anybody?
Tim.
Using
A
wood.
slabs.
These labs.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a material library.
Okay, that's a good example. You said using wood. I'm gonna blow all your minds. Reusing existing materials, right? And the reason I give that example, I'm not trying to trick anybody, but in LEED version 5, you get double the amount of points for reusing materials or existing building stock. You get points, and we are encouraging everyone to double dip because it is the best strategy out there. Not only are we being resource efficient, right? We're keeping existing building stock or materials in circulation, so promoting circular economy. Typically, reused materials don't off-gas at the point in their life in which they're being reused. So we're really starting to hit all these things. And in the materials and resources calculator for reducing embodied carbon, you zero out your impacts, right? So essentially, I mean, there's deeper accounting practices for life cycle assessment in which you might reevaluate a reused material, but essentially you're getting rewarded in EPD analysis or whole building LCA, in the building and materials reuse credit, and in the prerequisite. So there are just a ton of opportunities there. And to speak to that a little bit, really the biggest priority as our team was kind of setting goals and building out these credits for LEED version 5 was, you know, what is the best way that we can draw down embodied carbon? And so thinking about preserving and protecting and restoring and reusing as really our biggest heavy hitters of drawing down embodied carbon. Honestly, yeah, I mean, you can see like even low embodied carbon materials are like, it's pretty good, but it's not that good. And since Sheree's taking a picture, I'll explain one more thing. The maximizing efficiency, I think this also starts to speak to that collaboration with the full design and construction team. Who do we think we talk to about maximizing efficiency for embodied carbon?
Contractors.
Ooh, contractors, structural engineer. Ooh, structural engineer too, but also contractors, because you know they're dealing with waste on site, they're dealing with creative strategies. So I think we're able to be so much more successful when we bring this collaboration and goal setting super early. And then this is our kind of a tidied up scorecard for the materials and resources credit category. So we've got planning for zero waste operations, and then that quantify and assess embodied carbon credit that I was talking about. We have calculators for all of these. And you can see a couple highlights. Building and materials reuse is its own credit now, which is really exciting. Assessing embodied carbon is now prereq. Low emitting materials has moved from indoor environmental quality to materials and resources. And then these three credits, you might remember BPDO, that was the old building product disclosure and optimization credit. All of these are now together under the BPSP credit. So that's even a combined calculator with low emitting materials. And we have a ton more points for materials in B5, which was like big happy dance for me, because it's really great to have more credits or more points to play with in our credit category. Okay, and then I think I'm going to talk about energy and atmosphere. So it's a little bit of a spicy way to start here, but it's a huge source of emissions. It really does need to be addressed early. But I think it's this this combination, like LEED isn't just about materials and resources or just about energy, it's about all of it, right? So let's start moving it all together. Okay, gonna pause. Question before I get in.
Prerequisite on the embodied carbon calcs, is that like a C-scale level, or do we need to get down to individual materials and bill of material type of stuff?
So it depends. If a project is pursuing whole building life cycle assessment, they would only need to attach like basically a copy of the report from the whole building LCA software. And I saw that C-Scale acquired Tally,
Yeah.
so which is really exciting. So hopefully and we're working with the C-Scale team on some collaboration. So hopefully there'll be kind of an like approved tool list in which you could use C-Scale for it. But the way the calculator is set up now for like, if the team wasn't planning on doing any of the materials and resources credits, they would just enter their materials, the quantities, and then the associated GWP impacts and source. So typically it's going to be CLF material baseline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Oh, clarify. Okay. Cool. Anybody else? I know I've got like 15 minutes. I'm gonna zoom. Okay, so EA is about carbon literacy in the same way that materials and resources is, but it's really about that framework to reduce or eliminate emissions and lower those operational energy costs, which we know always comes hand in hand with wanting energy efficiency. Also existing buildings is a critical piece of this. O&M has some great EA requirements now. But kind of the key changes here. So talked about that already, but the electrification, reduced peak thermal loads, and energy efficiency are really our kind of heavy hitters that we want to be focusing on for EA. And there are new credits, which I'll actually come back to those slides. But so the electrification and reduced peak thermal loads, there's kind of an overview of those two credits. And one thing I also want to highlight is there are 3 regional credits for cold climates. But really, these are, going to be great new credits. You can get an additional credit for no combustion also, which is fantastic. And then you can see on the other side there, kind of where you're going to start to see reducing peak thermal loads. It's really exciting stuff there. I'm going to go back real quick. So while EA tends to hit pretty heavily on the decarbonization side, also quality of life, right? Again, we're hot in this room right now, and thinking about understanding these more climatic pieces and keeping operations in line over time, as well as those kind of greater efficiency measures that we can implement on a building scale. So, EA always gets the most points. They're like the cool kids at the party, right? You're like, okay, what do we think of when we think of sustainability is energy efficiency, which is awful. And so you can see there's a lot of points for enhanced energy efficiency, a lot of kind of opportunities there, in addition to like electrification is a big one, renewables. There's a lot of work right now going into like greenie equivalencies and what this is all going to look like, because obviously we don't necessarily want people in Boise buying really cheap RECs in Texas that's not even a part of their grid to start figuring things out, right? We want to work on our grid here. We want to be an effective part of the community in that way. So really good credit there. And then these have all been updated, and this is for BDNC and IDNC. So I will note that there is really a greater focus on plug loads with enhanced energy efficiency. And then we start to see some kind of like processes, and this might be helpful for Dylan and his question, but starting to understand like refrigerant management on a greater, more nitty-gritty scale too. So overview of those. And then I do want to highlight these platinum certification requirements. So I'm not going to read through all of these, and I'll kind of keep to the bottom here, but there are you have to earn 10 points under enhanced energy efficiency for a platinum project. That's a big jump. And then additionally, for reducing embodied carbon, you have to have a 20% reduction in embodied carbon, even to achieve platinum at all, right? So it's required for every single project to assess and quantify their embodied carbon, but now to even think about platinum, it has to be 20% reduction, which is not small. And then additionally, earning 5 points under electrification and renewable energy. So I think the no greenhouse gas emissions from on-site is a big one, and then the 100% renewable energy is also a big jump from what we've had in the past. So really a big step up on the platinum requirements there. Okay. You may have noticed in the scorecard that there's a lot more points for the project priority library than there was in the past. You can earn up to 10 points, right? Which is awesome. This does include, like, you know, those regional points that I was talking about, like for cold weather climate or innovation pilot credits and exemplary performance. So like you can get exemplary performance for the reduced embodied carbon credit, for example. But so there's a lot of options there. If you want to scan the QR code if you're interested, it'll take you to the project priority library. But a couple of ones I want to highlight, and you know, I guessed that Tim was going to come, so I like put in this credit specifically. I know it's a really ugly slide, but within the MR credit category, we have, this is the BPSP matrix that I was talking about earlier. So we have started to take all of these certifications and kind of rank them from 5 criteria areas in which we consider to be multi-attribute. In the credit, it's primarily interior non-structural products, right? So like paint, coating, flooring products, stuff like that. We heard loud and clear from the MVP community that like they want to go multi-attribute 100%. And so in the MVP 2040 Beginner's Guide to Embodied Carbon, they actually called out LEED specifically and were like, hey, USGBC, we want to go multi-attribute, like put me in, coach. And so we made a pilot credit in which project teams can be rewarded for multi-attribute MEP products, which is really exciting. There are a lot of EPDs in the market currently, and MEP 2040 does have a database for that. But you can get kind of extra reward if you start hitting this notable EPD gaps category from MEP 2040. So we're very excited about this credit and their involvement. For my concrete nerds out there, you can get a pilot credit for testing out an innovative mix and implementing it. It does have to be genuinely lower embodied carbon. We saw a bit of a pushback on that, but you do have to use, you know, a genuinely innovative mix. And we do a survey and a case study that'll come with this. Again, this can be found in the pilot credit library, project priority library, along with the others. Or you can go just really kick butt on a performance standpoint using the GCCA again. So that's a really exciting pilot credit. And all of these are super new. They came out in like end of last year, and then some came out in February. And then there we go. Design for circularity. Who wants to do deconstruction on a project? Anybody? So this project priority credit is really about, you know, testing circular design strategies on a project. And this, I mean, when I say deconstruction, that's like, you know, the really high end of this, but it's like, okay, do you have demountable partitions? Can you see your connections and understand how they come apart? There's a really long list of strategies that people can do, but basically you'll pick 3 of those strategies to implement, have a plan that kind of explains how they were done on the project, and then that bill of materials will just be included from prior credits. And what that entails is basically the information you have from the BPSP credit of like what materials are in my building. Are they super toxic? Because we don't want to put project teams, demolition and deconstruction teams at risk, so they know what's in there. And then path 2 is really about like, we don't have to tell the deconstruction contractors how to take a building apart. They know, but telling them here's where to look for connections, here's what type they are, and then here's the product documentation that says it's safe to take apart. It's not filled with asbestos. There's some other nasty adhesives and stuff. So this credit is very screws not glues oriented. With that, any questions? Give you all so much information today.
In general, how does LEED USGBC approach trying to push the industry forward without getting beyond what people are able to do economically?
Yeah, so I will say with that, I think that's like the technical advisory groups and the LEED steering committee and consensus committee kind of serve as that, in addition to public comment. The process is very iterative. Like we have multiple, I mean, we had for materials and resources, I think we had like 2,000 public comments that our team went through one by one and like either flagged it to be incorporated and adjusted in the rating system, or like, this is like a V6 kind of thing. So I think like that process, but also I'll give MVP as an example. Like there's not a lot of stuff out there right now in the market, but using it as a pilot credit is like a testing ground and also market signal. So we try to use pilot credits as like that, like let's push the envelope. And then I think really just getting enough feedback from the market to say like, it's hard, but it can be done. So I think that's what we try to use to gauge. And I actually talk about in my work all the time, you know, people will bring up like, oh, this isn't hard enough or whatever for like when we were working on rating system development. And I'm like, okay, can my 5-person firm in Boise, Idaho do this credit at some level, but also can a platinum project in New York get it done, right? So like, I think it's easy to be like, oh yeah, let's get it done. Let's just push as hard as we can. But like, we also have to remember that like, we can show leadership in our community, which is one that like we have to push to do sustainability measures often. So I think trying to understand that range is important to everyone on our team.
Sure.
Yeah. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
How much has the like minimum efficiency requirement changed in LEED V5 versus 1.1?
That's a good question. It's hard to give it like a number because I think it's kind of like shifted, like some of the requirements and thresholds have changed a little bit, but I'm happy to like try to get a number and like email it to you if that's helpful.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the methodology had changed or it was kind of keeping the same methodology but adjusting some of those like percent better than.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of both. Like you're like the focus on like plug loads, like there's kind of a shift in like primarily the methodology is the same, but there have been a little like small shifts in that. So it's, while there has been like an increase in where those thresholds are for enhanced energy efficiency, it's kind of a little bit of both, if that makes sense. Not super helpful answer your question.
It's the new Appendix G framework though, so that's
Okay.
messy.
How many LEED buildings are being built in Idaho? Yeah, I did.
Last I heard, like a couple right now. Charlie probably has a way better answer on that than I do because he's actually like privy to the pulse a little more. I'm happy to ask him, but I unfortunately don't think it's very many.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure like when the last one was in Boise.
I think GGLOs may have been the last in Boise, unless you guys have something more recently, Tim.
I don't think so.
Because the GGLO building was it was gold corn shell and I think also gold O&M. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, there hasn't been, and I think, I mean, just like being candid, it's like, I think like LEED V4 and 4.1 are pretty, you know, it doesn't even really feel like we've kind of gotten past those measures. So I don't know that LEED was even like very exciting, but like 12 years into the market shift. But I mean, the city of Boise, well, the city of Boise actually has some, like, you just reminded me, like State and Arthur or Wilson Station off of State Street is at least LEED silver. Because the city,
Sustainable housing, they always push for that.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
I don't think they've failed for any of them.
yeah. Well, the city of Boise has like the requirement that for their buildings, it's either like Boise Green Building Code or LEED silver. And like typically they, like there's a lot of projects, especially with affordable housing that just like Dylan said, just go with LEED silver. So they can get plaque.
I would also be curious, like how many and we had this discussion when we discussed Charlie coming to Idaho to talk about LEED is how many are following those requirements but not getting it certified?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's still an impact, even though you can't say that it's a certified building, but there's still a positive impact on that scenario.
Did Charlie tell you he doesn't live in Idaho?
No, but I don't know where he lives. I guess I assumed he was in
here.
Denver. Oh, I thought he moved to Denver.
No, he's just there all the time.
Okay.
I
I thought he moved.
Charlie, did you move? No.
I thought he lived in Denver, so
You're
that
totally
might be
fine.
my bad.
He spends a ton of time there. So
I thought he lived in Denver for like the last 8 years too.
that's crazy. Yeah. It happened. Yeah, Dylan.
There are approximately 136 LEED certified projects in the state of Idaho. But my question is to deal with buildings like the one we're in right now, which is LEED certified, but it's been a long time since this building was built.
Yeah.
So is there anything to force or strongly recommend projects to recertify? Or is there like an expiration date for LEED certification?
So since LEED B, and C is like a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
When the building is built, like there's no, it's not gonna, they're not gonna like come and rip your plaque off the wall, right? But I will say, like there is and I think there's almost always outreach to project owners on this, but like I think it's, I can't remember the time frame, but they'll send like hey, do you want to get like O&M certified? And then there's like recertification time frames for O&M. And I mean, I think we've all dealt with the thermal zones in this building. It could certainly use an O&M. Or at least some testing from the lab. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, since it's like, you know, you're never, I mean, like for example, you're not going to do like a bill of materials again for the projects or the products you're going to procure for this building, right? Like 10 years later, because most things won't need to be dealt with at all. But yeah, it's very much like you should get an O&M certification, but it's not required. There is a recertification process for O&M that projects have to do, but yeah.
Does the ARC platform still exist?
Oh yeah. Actually, with like LEED Online for LEED V5, everything goes to ARC. Not for like 4 and 4.1 will still be LEED Online. But with LEED V5, there's some pretty slick stuff in ARC. Like the forms are in there, and we're working on a ton of really awesome collaboration with like Autodesk and Revit and a ton of other like HPDC platforms and stuff like that. So we're trying to streamline with APIs and stuff in the future to like get the data that's coming. And eventually the calculators we hope will be integrated, but we have a pretty small IT team, so it's probably a little longer range. But yeah, most stuff is in ARC now, which is great. Yeah. And it's been very upgraded. Nobody wants to like download and like lose 50 of them somewhere. But, yeah. Cool.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hopefully it was helpful, and feel free to email me with questions. I think my email is. But thanks, everybody.